Buenos días, muchachos. Bienvenidos a otro Hablemos de Radio. Otro sábado más. Hoy tenemos invitado aquí a una. Vamos a tener un programa bastante interesante con el invitado especial Mike Crownover, a 5 de Bravo. Déjame poner que nos va a hablar sobre la isla de Bouvet. Déjame comenzar aquí un momentico. Share screen. And then we'll start here. Okay. Vamos a hablar de Bouvet, isla de Bouvet. Hablemos de radio esta mañana. Un poquitico de historia. Porque esta reunión, bueno, Bouvet se encuentra entre las entidades más, es la entidad número 2 entre las 20 entidades más buscadas del DXCC. Creo que ha habido más gente que ha viajado a la luna que ha operado desde Bouvet. Desde 1962, estas han sido todas las operaciones que han salido de Bouvet. La última en 2018, que llegó a la isla, vio la isla de frente y se tuvieron que devolver, ya que tuvieron problemas con el barco. ¿Dónde está Bouvet? Bueno, ahí tienen más o menos una idea de dónde está ubicada la comparación con Venezuela, justamente en el medio del Océano Índico allá. Y para los que están listos para trabajarla, el short pass desde Venezuela son 147 grados y el long pass a 292 grados. Y más o menos las distancias son de 9.338 kilómetros desde Caracas hasta Bouvet. Así que en el medio de la nada. Hoy tenemos invitado a Mike Crownover, a 5 de Bravo. Aquí pueden ver varias de sus pequeñas instalaciones de torres y expediciones que ha estado. Mike tiene el de XCC con 348. IOTA con 904 islas, y hay la cantidad de islas que ha activado, que realmente puede ser parte del grupo de X Caracas. Y con todo esto, all right, Mike, let me just queue up your presentation. Give me 1 sec.
Okay.
There we go. Well, that's it. Con todo eso, le voy a dar la bienvenida a Mike. Mike no habla español, así que yo voy a tratar de hacer las traducciones lo más preciso posible. Así que
lo tienes en modo orador, no está en modo presentación.
yo tengo presentación aquí.
Lo que estamos visualizando es el modo orador. La primera lámina y la siguiente la segunda.
Espérate. Share screen.
Ahora sí. Adelante.
Mike, all yours, buddy.
Okay. So I guess when I want to switch the screen, I'll just tell you and
Yep.
you switch. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys letting me just kind of inform you of the planned trip to Bouvet. I'm sure if you've followed this island along, you know, over the years, there's been several attempts, and for various different reasons, they haven't been successful. And as I get into helping plan this and understand this, then I start to understand why so many of those challenges weren't accomplished. And you realize that even your best laid plans for Bouvet, you still may never step foot on the island. So it truly is a very difficult destination. This Norwegian team basically that has put this together has a different approach based on actual Norwegians who have frequented the island fishing and actually have some pretty firsthand experience. For example, landing on the beach we're going to attempt to land on. We know people have done it. So it's a different approach. It's not to take away from the prior approaches. They all took on this challenge, and I even respect those efforts more now that I'm trying to help make this happen myself. So I can go to the next one. I know that you guys went over this a little bit, but just a little bit of information about Bouvet's location. We are planning, currently we're not sure if we're going to leave from Ushuaia or Port Stanley. It's looking like we might lean towards Ushuaia, largely due to a lot of the COVID restrictions in place still in Port Stanley. Leaving from Ushuaia will give us about another day of selling. So we're already looking at possibly 12 days from Port Stanley. And then, of course, spending hopefully close to 20 days on the island operating. That entails 3 days of landing and 3 days of getting off. Those are kind of the windows we have created to try to get on and off the island. And then, of course, because of the prevailing winds, we won't go back to Ushuaia, we'll go to Cape Town. This was different than whenever we had the Braveheart, because the Braveheart, we were going to leave from Cape Town and then return to Cape Town. But this is the vessel, we can talk about the vessel in a minute, but that's pretty much the logistics of getting there. So can you go to the next slide? So this is some basic information about the island. Over the last several years, as we've seen global warming, we've seen glaciers retract, it really has allowed a little bit of a different approach to Bouvet. One of the problems with Bouvet is that the government no longer allows non-scientists to land at the location of prior Bouvet operations. Landing on the glacier obviously requires a helicopter, and is actually quite dangerous to set up on the glacier, although expeditions have done it in the past. There was one location, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, that the Norwegian government feels it's actually safe. As you can look in this picture alone, where could you possibly even stand on the beach and feel safe? These glaciers tower hundreds of feet over you, and obviously if they calve or break off on top of you, you're done. So there's just lots of places that aren't even options to even set foot on Bouvet. The weather is, planning for this expedition has meant basically planning for storms possibly every day. You have 300 stormy days. The good weather windows we have to use to land on the island, but we have to build the camp in whatever weather we have. So we have to plan for building camps in blizzard conditions, because we can't possibly sit around and wait with our time on Bouvet. It'll be precious. So all from clothing to staying warm to the logistics of, that we don't get lost in a whiteout condition. All things have to be taken into consideration. And of course, it's very helpful to have the Norwegians on board who spend not only time on Bouvet, but time in their own country in the north, which has similar winter conditions. So we can go to the next one. So this is the vessel. As you know, well, you may not know, we initially were going to go with the Braveheart, which is a tried and true vessel. Basically, COVID and the restrictions the New Zealand government put on the Braveheart basically sank the Braveheart. It just couldn't financially operate. It couldn't operate. And the Braveheart requires about $6,000 a month just to sit in the port. And so you can imagine a year of no work, and then planning stuff out a year, it just basically couldn't sustain itself anymore. I know there's still some ongoing efforts to try that, but it wasn't an option to us eventually. And that was when the initial 3Y0J expedition dissolved. All donations were given back. So this is the vessel we've come up with, and actually I think it's a little bit, it's shorter than the Braveheart by, I believe the Braveheart, I could be wrong, but by at least probably 10 meters shorter than the Braveheart. But it's also a different, it's a sailboat, and it's designed to go much faster than the Braveheart. And it's long enough that, and it's spent a lot of time. It spends its times in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So these guys are very familiar with Arctic and Antarctic conditions. So we can go to the next slide. So here's the location. So to the west is, you can tell the elevation increases, and the dramatic cone of the volcano and the very sheer cliffs of Bouvet are to the west. The expeditions normally take place in the northwest. You can see where there's actually some flat land, but that's also where the weather station is, and the Norwegian government no longer allows non-scientists to this area. So that they've told us we could go to Camp Fier, which, as you see, is on the very opposite side. But it's also a place that's safe from glaciers, and we don't have to worry about that. There is a small protected area. The thing about the Bouvet weather is the weather is changing multiple times a day from different directions, oftentimes. So although your landing opportunities may not be long in time, there are actually a fair amount of them. With a helicopter, that becomes a problem because they don't want a short opening. They want to feel comfortable that they're going to get there and the wind's not going to pick up. So that's one of the reasons we've chosen to not go forward with a helicopter, is largely the Norwegians think that it's better to try this way. And it makes sense. And now that you have a location like Camp Fier that the government will allow us to use, that was part of the reason for going with a Zodiac beach landing as opposed to the helicopter. The next slide. So this is our budget. We've come quite a long ways. 3Y0J initially had raised over 500,000, and we've already exceeded that amount by a little bit from getting people to donate again. So we're getting real close, and of course we appreciate any amount of help. But we think we're going to be able to hopefully raise all the funds prior to departure. We've already made our down payment on the vessel, so things are moving forward quickly. Okay, we go to the next one. So some of this has been over. It's number 2 in the world. The team of operators is listed there. There's actually a 13th operator, and actually I don't even know his call. So more information to come on that, but he's more of a technical Arctic traveler who is an operator, but his expertise in landing boats and climbing rocks is where he'll actually help us all as well. So we're going to really focus on, well, those are the 4 modes we're going to focus on. I don't know if anybody worked Tango 7 Mike recently, but that was Ken, LA7 GIA, and he was running 2 radios at the same time, doing CW and FT8. And he put up some very impressive numbers, and that's basically I think the technique we're going to try to expand on. So we have a bunch of good operators. We've tried to have a relatively younger group of operators given the physical demand of landing on Bouvet. There is a 10-meter cliff that we have to climb, and Ken is actually a climber at LA7 GIA. I've done a little bit of work with that. And so that's the goal. It's ambitious. It's we have to plan for failure, really, because there's no easy way off of Bouvet once you get there. If our tents get blown down, we have to plan for that and how we'll survive that. Not, well, let's just go get on the boat and go home. So you plan for something that works, and then you plan for the failure of it, and you plan how to deal with the failure of it. And it becomes exhausting. And as you can imagine, a lot of time and a lot of anxiety as you start to think of what the situation truly is that we're working towards. So, okay, we can go to the next one.
That was it. It's 7
Okay.
slides.
Is that good?
That's good, I think.
How long was that? I mean, I can go. I didn't want to take too long, so I don't know what.
You're about 12 minutes in, so yeah, take as much as you want.
Okay, I can expand on certain parts of that, but again, like, do we want to stop at maybe each slide and take questions?
We could.
Just so we don't totally lose the guys, if they.
Yeah, let me go ahead and open it up for questions, and then we can always go back in the slides.
Yeah.
Bueno, muchachos, estamos al punto aquí que comenzamos a hablar de radio y vamos a abrir para preguntas y vamos a ver para cubrir cualquier tipo de pregunta que tengan sobre la expedición. Y no se preocupen que si hay que traducir, yo me cargo de eso.
Adelante, Enrique, que levantó la mano, tiene una pregunta. Abre el micrófono.
Hi.
Perfecto, adelante.
Perfect. I've seen here in your last slide that your target is just 120K QSOs.
Yeah, I think
it's very conservative. Okay, I'm sure that 240 at least, because if you consider now that you have a lot of FTA contacts,
yeah.
and it's so desired, these Bouvet contacts at QSO, I think you're gonna double that target, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to realize that. I think that 120 is a very old expedition number, right? Before FTA, I think. I mean, I think Ken pushed 30,000 contacts when he was a one-man show for, maybe he was on for 10 days or so. So, we are planning on potentially having up to 8 stations. So I think we are going to blow past that. Of course, if you get on the island and you could only stay for 3 days and something tragic happens, then I guess, that's just the risk you take, or you don't get on the island at all. So I think every contact from Bouvet will be precious, but I agree with you. If we can pull this off, I think we'll easily be over 200,000 contacts. So.
I have another question for you. Based on the map of the island where the expedition is going to be located, it's well known that it depends on of hills or whatever. If they just crossing on the island, so you have more difficulties to reach a specific part of the planet, and the other part is more easy to get contacts. We faced that now recently with Galapagos, the expedition, because you have a mountain just between the continent and where the station was located. Okay, is this going to happen the same with you there because of that location?
So we've done some terrain analysis and propagation analysis from that specific location. The takeoff to the northwest, of course, has a volcano in front, but it's about 3 miles away, or similar. I believe that's correct. It's a long ways away. The ridge we're going to operate from is about 200 feet above sea level. So the analysis we've done from that terrain doesn't actually show the mountain to be much of a problem, because within 2 or 3 wavelengths, you really start to take off. And this at least from the analysis, it shows that it shouldn't affect our takeoff too much. We'll be at least as far away as we can from that if we're going to have, and we had no option. This is the only, well, there's one other option assuming if we can't make it to Camp Fier, but it's still on the south side of the island, and it's basically covered in elephant seals, which are, you know, they weigh 6,000 pounds, so over what, 12,000 kilos.
Yeah.
And they're not nice. So you can't stay on the beach with those guys. And we literally are going to have to get on a ridge that is very close to a cliff. So that Camp Fier is really where we want to be. Of course, we'd love to be where they used to operate from. It's a perfect spot, but it's just not a possibility.
So Mike, is it the location up here?
No, it's on the opposite side.
Just
Right
the
here?
opposite. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
southeast.
Yeah.
So completely opposite to the States.
Yes.
That's the reason of my question. Okay, if there's some
Yeah.
kind of physical obstacle in the middle, okay, that makes it more difficult to get touching with US or whatever.
Right.
So,
let me explain that in Spanish so the guys can understand this.
Yeah, sure.
La operación va a estar ubicada justamente aquí y hay montañas entre el continente americano y Bouvet, así que va a ser un poquito más difícil que las expediciones, previas expediciones a la isla. O sea que pueden ver. Now, are you guys selling out of Cape Town, you said, or you're selling from
Well, it's either going to lead from Port Stanley or Ushuaia. Again, it's looking like we're leaning more towards Ushuaia.
Yo de las Malvinas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, ¿cómo se llama? El velero va a salir de las Islas Malvinas hacia Bouvet. Ese es el plan que tienen ahorita. Usualmente las otras expediciones han salido de Sudáfrica, de Cape Town, pero esta va a salir de aquí de las Malvinas hacia Bouvet.
And that's basically because we're using the trade winds with the sailboat. That's the path.
Eso es para usar los vientos para utilizar todo el velero.
Da
Bueno,
miedo el asunto, ¿eh?
Yeah.
By this time, the material transportation is gonna made from the vessel to the island in which way?
So this is very interesting. We're going to use dinghies, zodiacs, to get to the beach. However, we're working on developing, again, with several of the Norwegian that have been to the island and landed on the island, a device where we anchor a pulley system probably close to 100 meters offshore, or maybe not quite so far. And then there is on the beach, there is a device that basically, it's a motor that turns the rope. And so we can put a Zodiac onto this. And of course, it's real easy to get a Zodiac on the island in almost any wave conditions, assuming there's no humans on it. The problem is getting it back off, because you got to take it to waves. So we're working on other ways. So for example, if we have food supplies that we can put in, let's say a insulated bag and run it through the surf, once the bag's empty, it's very easy to pull a rolled up bag back out through the bigger waves. So that technique won't work for all of our supplies, clearly, or getting humans onto the island. But it does expand the conditions that we can get equipment onto the island. Now, from that point, it is actually basically a lift system that we have to climb to the top and install. And then there's another motor at the top of that runs another line that will actually lift the equipment up over the ridge. So we aren't planning on moving the operators that way. Everybody is going to have to likely once it's scaled and there's a rope, there are devices that you can basically shimmy straight up a rope with you don't have to be able to climb, so again, there are many possible fail points in this, but we actually trying to limit the steps so that we don't have as many of those. So,
yeah, because I remember the previous attempt. Okay, the expedition was depending. Esteban, aí se a tradução depois todo em conjunto, por favor, tá bem? The first attempt I remember very well that you were dependent on two persons, the vessel captain, okay, and then secondly on the pilots itself of the helicopter pilots. So you can reach with your vessel close to the island, but then you were dependent on the decision of the helicopter driver. So two risky situations, okay? And so I've been in touch with one of these helicopter drivers, someone from Chile, and he told me, look, at that time I make my decision because the helicopter commander, it was mine, it was too risky to take my helicopter and to bring this stuff to the island. So in this situation that you're showing now, you're getting rid of this wreck somehow, okay? This is my understanding. Let me, Esteban, haga la traducción, por favor.
Okay, Mike estaba explicando cómo van a hacer el transporte desde el velero a la isla a través de Zodiacs. Y al llegar a la isla hay que subir los equipos con una polea sobre la montaña donde está ahí. Y el riesgo es, por supuesto, que todo se pueda caer. Aparte de eso, está el riesgo de la marea. O sea y el equipo está ahorita entrenando para esa parte y tener todo eso bajo control. Las expediciones anteriores, como estaba diciendo Enrique, han tenido el apoyo de helicópteros que han podido salir del barco y llevar los equipos a la isla. En esta expedición no van a tener esa oportunidad. Por eso que esta expedición es un poquito más riesgosa que las otras que se han hecho. Sebastián, had a questions?
Tiene una pregunta Sebastián y luego Antonio. Adelante. Quien quiera levante la mano a través de la aplicación para darle derecho de palabra. Adelante, Sebastián.
I have a question about, I've heard that the team is practicing landings and things like that. I think it was at Jan Mayen or Svalbard, somewhere in the northern hemisphere, trying to nail it down. So if you can talk a little bit about that. And my second question is if you can talk a little bit about the antenna plan. What's how you plan to set up and all of that?
Okay, sure. So yeah, recently the group went to Svalbard to do an IOTA there. A lot of the guys that are going have a lot of the expedition experience, but truly, if you look at this is much more in line with an IOTA expedition, if you ever follow IOTA, which is really where my forte is. And so the idea of landing on an island with a generator is really, not many people do that, even no matter where they go in the world, because they have a helicopter or something else to get them there. That's pretty much the only way I've done expeditions, although Bouvet is obviously clearly much more difficult than those. So the Norwegians went on a IOTA expedition, and it was really good for them to figure out the tent, the heating. For example, we're going to heat the tent with paraffin, and how much they consume there, and all of these things that just come with that sort of expedition. They've been already testing the landing pulley system in Norway. They're getting it ready to really test it during the winter conditions, which will hopefully get close to simulating the summer conditions in Bouvet. So yes, they are working on that. We're supposed to meet in Norway in April as a team and go through the radios, which we still haven't, made a choice on the radios. The antennas, as you asked about, we do have a sponsor for the antennas. I'm going to say this wrong, but the Innovation Novo antennas out of England. They're actually going to make a tri-bander. They're going to call it the Bouvet. So we are looking and again, these decisions haven't been finalized, but we are looking at the moment at likely taking tri-banders. As much as we would like to take mono-banders, the challenge of getting this stuff up to Bouvet, the footprint of the campsite, there's a cliff on one side and there's a glacier on the other, and we have probably maybe 100 meters of land in between those two. We do have several hundred meters north and south to expand through, but it is a hillside. It's not flat. So even the idea of which tent we take and how we set it up all create big issues when you look at a tent that's engineered to be flat. And there's a decent chance it may not be. And that's the other thing. We've reached out even to the Norwegian government. If they could tell us what the rock is, what is the substrate we're going to be on at Camp Fier, they don't know. They've never tested those soils. In fact, they've asked us to bring back samples from this location because nobody knows, you know, what it truly is. We expect it to clearly be some volcanic rock, but what form of it, we won't know till we get there. So it's a lot of challenges. We do on the low bands. We're looking more at vertical inverted L's, I believe, on 160, but all of these are still being worked through, and even the type of radio we're going to take isn't finalized. So there's a lot to do by the time we leave. We're way down the road on all of those things, and we've been presented with lots of options. So you know, but you know, there are some radios we would love to take, but then you think about the functionality of Bouvet and how complex do we need to be, or how simple do we need to keep it. And I think that's the way when you start looking at the landing and what that's going to take and the weight of things and all these other things, it starts to change the way you look at it. So I hope that answers the question. So.
Excelente. Antonio, adelante.
Okay, gracias, Eduardo. Esteban, voy a hacer la pregunta en español porque sabes que mi inglés para hablarlo sobre todo es complicado.
Okay.
Mira, en lo referente mismo de lo que habló Enrique sobre la seguridad y el transbordo de la expedición a la isla, es una preocupación que yo tengo, más que todo, es porque van en un velero y sabemos que la expedición anterior fue abortada, por, bueno, aparte de la falla que tuvo el barco de motores, los grandes vientos que habían en la zona. Entonces, no sé si ellos han calculado bien o qué cálculos habrán hecho sobre el riesgo de una expedición en una zona donde los vientos son fuertes, los mares son fuertes, e ir en un velero. O sea, creo que el riesgo es, no sé, me parece que la embarcación no debe ser la más adecuada para ese viaje. Me imagino que ellos deben haber tomado todas esas previsiones, pero ¿qué cálculo de riesgo han hecho ellos? Por eso mismo, por la expedición anterior, fracasó por los fuertes vientos que no pudieron desembarcar. ¿Qué pasaría estando con un velero, sabiendo que un velero lo mueve es el viento? Y viento fuerte, bueno, para un velero es bastante complicado navegar. Ese sería más que una pregunta, una incertidumbre que tengo sobre el viaje.
Okay. All right, Mike, I'll try to do my best to translate the whole long story that
okay. When I answer, I'll take
no tan larga.
So
the biggest concern here, you know, with it, he's asking, have you guys put into the equation the whole transportation part? You know, the previous expedition went with a bigger boat, motorized boat, and a helicopter, and still failed. You guys are going on a sailboat, and that adds another layer of complexity to the trip. Have you guys how are you guys putting that into the equation of the project?
Okay, so I'll answer this and then maybe take a pause so you can keep them up to speed. But you gotta, so one thing is the question is about the boat type really, right? So, and the hull type. So when you have a 300 foot or 100 meter vessel, you have a displacement hull that sits in the water. and it tries to stay in the water. And when the waves come, it obviously has to respond to those. And that is how the prior trip was in the 2018 trip. And that's how the Braveheart works. A 100-foot ocean catch works differently. It tries to get on top of the waves and sail that way. So you want to stop there? I don't get too far.
Okay, so that's kind of like trying to figure out the best way to explain this in Spanish. El tamaño de los botes anteriores comparados con este ha sido una de las decisiones para ellos ir con este velero. Aparte de eso, la manera como el velero navega comparado con los botes de motores es totalmente distinto. What was that about the waves?
So the bigger ship, what they call displacement holes. So they try to push through the waves. The hole is below the waves, but on the sailboat, it's 101 feet long. So it tries to get on top of the waves. And if the frequency of the waves is close enough, you can actually end up with a smoother ride than on a boat that's having to fight each wave.
La manera que los veleros funcionan es que ellos pasan por encima de la ola, comparado con los barcos convencionales, van por dentro, por el medio de la ola. La idea es que por eso es que el viaje debería ser, técnicamente sería un poco más suave con el velero, al comparado que.
But Mike, are you not afraid that the water is gonna come over the deck and then it's gonna disturb something on the equipment, something like that? Because on a large vessel, you don't have such a water over the deck, and on a sailing vessel, it's different, huh?
So yeah, the boat is designed for that. So the buoyancy of the ship, of course, will bring the boat back up, but it can go, and of course, everyone is below deck in those situations. And all the heads are closed and everything. So the idea is that this vessel may actually get us there much quicker than either of the other two vessels.
Sure.
It can. The captain thinks it may not be hard for us at all at times to make 20 knots. We were never going to make more than 10 or 11 knots with the Braveheart.
Okay. Let me explain that real quick.
Yes.
Una de las ideas es que con el velero la velocidad de travesía va a ser mucho más rápida que con los barcos tradicionales. El capitán del barco ahorita está diciendo aproximadamente el averaje de movimientos más o menos a unos 20 nudos, comparado con 10 nudos cuando es un barco convencional. Así que eso todo está puesto en la ecuación de la expedición. Sebastián, ¿tenías una pregunta?
Tengo una pregunta, pero quiero hacer un comentario antes. I'm gonna try to sell the expedition to the crowd, if you don't mind, because I know that you guys need money. Yo sé que en Venezuela los dólares son un poquito escasos, pero aquí en la audiencia hay muchos que están fuera de Venezuela. Y si ustedes pueden donar plata a la expedición, y donando $26 tienen acceso a las reuniones de Zoom del grupo y a noticias de cómo va el progreso. Pueden verlo como que están comprando tickets para una película de ciencia ficción, básicamente, porque esto de aterrizar en Bouvet es nada fácil. Así que les recomiendo que se pasen por el sitio web, que es 3yankees0juliet.novemberoscar, 3yoj.no, y ahí pueden donar plata para el proyecto. No, so now after this brief commercial interruption, I have a question. Especially, I mean, you have experience with IOTA and all that. What's your thought on the RIB, the Radio in a Box project?
You know, I haven't been asked that question, but you mean the ones that would be placed and maybe possibly left
on the island? Yeah, they've been testing it in the Bahamas and.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think if you're just subjective about it, that if you're going to allow somebody to sit up remotely from anywhere, if you can be in the States and work and operate a station out of the Caribbean somewhere, I don't really see a lot of difference. I think ultimately the challenge is what everybody makes it for themselves. And if you're not content with talking to a box that's left on Bouvet, then that's okay, you know. But the point is getting your radio signal to that island and them acknowledging it.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say it's what I grew up doing, what none of us grew up doing, really, right? To me, part of it is the adventure of following these guys. I mean, I remember the Braveheart from when I was a kid, you know. So those stories are part of the legacy of the program. So I think it would obviously diminish that in some way, but it doesn't change the fact that your signal made it to that location.
And I think, I mean, one of the things that's interesting is that there's some islands where access is really restricted.
Yes.
Where it will be impossible to camp. You'll
Yes.
never get a permit to camp in there anymore. And
Yeah.
it does open the option to do this.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Para continuar lo que está diciendo tú, Sebastián, el problema es que el DXC no permite operaciones remotas todavía. Y eso es uno de los factores que es una operación remota de ese tipo, tener un equipo remoto en estos tipos de lugares, eso también, o sea, sería totalmente inválido contra el DXC.
Sí. Aunque la operación, el remoto en este sistema tiene que estar a 100, 200 metros de la radio. No puedes estar.
No, el DXC no permite ningún tipo de operación.
La antena, bueno, sí, está la discusión de si la antena tiene que estar en la isla, pero el operador también.
Exactamente.
Sí.
And Steve, one thing about that idea for Bouvet is we're not allowed to leave anything on Bouvet.
Eso lo otro que sucede es que una de las reglas en muchas de estas islas, incluyendo las islas americanas como de Seychelles, como Navassa, no puedes dejar nada en la isla. Tienes que dejar la isla como la encontraste.
Y se pierde la esencia. Se pierde
O sea,
la esencia de las expediciones, pues.
y eso es lo que ha causado que muchos de estos países no den permiso porque han habido complicaciones después de una expedición.
¿Y que tiene una pregunta?
¿Yo puedo?
¿Sí?
Okay, Mike, although the less successful the expedition happened many, many years ago, have you been in touch with these previous the expeditions teams to learn about what went wrong, so in order to avoid any kind of surprises?
Yes.
Let me translate it
yes.
to
Cerrate el micrófono. Enrique, cerrate el micrófono. Ok.
Otra vez.
Acá, bien, perdón.
Sí.
Yo hice la pregunta a Mike, de que a pesar de que la última expedición que sucedió, y fue bien hace muchos años atrás, si ellos tuvieron contacto con estas teams de las expediciones anteriores para saber lo que pasó mal, para aprender con esto y no repetir con los errores.
Yes, we have reached out to actually pretty much everyone that has tried recently to go to Bouvet, and many in years past. In fact, the Norwegians, this is a Norwegian possession, so they have a handful of people that have actually been on Bouvet multiple times as commercial fishermen. One of our resources was actually anchored off of the beach for a week we were going to stay at because his nets got caught in his prop and he had to stay there. So he'd get to experience the weather in that location for a week and has pretty intimate knowledge of that coast area. I don't know if you want to translate that or.
No,
Yeah.
Esteban.
All right, let's start from the beginning there. Try to get my train of thought here. El problema es la cantidad de, o sea, what was the last piece again, Mike?
I was just saying that not only have we reached out to the expeditions, but the Norwegians are in a unique situation to, talk to people who have spent a lot of time on Bouvet. And one of them even spent a week anchored off because of their prop getting snarled. So.
El grupo de la expedición ha estado en contacto con la gente de Noruega y con los científicos sobre otras expediciones que han estado ahí para tener más información, y uno de los miembros del grupo estuvo accidentado enfrente a la isla por un buen tiempo, y con él han hablado esa información para tratar de tener un plan de ataque, sí, por las cosas buenas y las cosas malas que puedan suceder en este viaje. Right,
And
I do
another point, yes.
I got a quick question, Mike.
Okay.
So looking at your slide, the average cost to jump into an expedition is $20,000. That's
Yes.
the buy-in.
That's the each operator price. Yes.
Let me explain that in Spanish so they understand some of the costs involved here.
Okay.
Para la entrada a la expedición, para ser parte del equipo de operación, la cantidad necesaria son $20,000 por operador. Ese es el costo que sale del bolsillo de cada operador que va a ir para Bouvet. Para que ustedes se den más o menos cuenta de, comparado con las expediciones que hacemos nosotros del grupo de Caracas. O sea, es un costo. Y aparte de eso, how many vacations that you taking, Mike?
So I'm having to plan for 2 months off of work, although the hope is we can make the whole trip in 6 weeks.
So you're taking a leave of absence for 2 months?
A leave of absence, basically, yes.
Él va a pedir, aquí en Estados Unidos se llama, tú puedes pedir permiso del trabajo por 2 meses sin paga. ¿Ok? O sea, que son 2 meses sin salario para esta expedición. Así que ten en cuenta que cuando este tipo de operaciones suceden, no es por las gracias de Dios, que o sea, hay un costo bastante gigantesco, no solamente para la operación, sino también para los operadores.
Esteban, esos $20,000 solamente es para participar, porque eso me imagino que no incluye los pasajes, por ejemplo, de Estados Unidos a la última isla donde se va a tomar el velero.
All right, so one of the questions they had is that $20,000, that does not cover the travel costs for you to get to the place you need to get to and aboard the ship and your meals and everything else, right?
No, that all goes towards the cost of the expedition. So we all have to get ourselves there and back as well.
Exacto, Mauro. Eso solamente es ese es el costo para tú poder ser parte de la expedición, pero todos tus costos de movimiento desde tu país al sitio, tus comidas, todo, eso es aparte. Así que
One
imagínate.
person will have maybe $40,000.
So what's the average cost for an operator out of pocket? We said the $20,000.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't had the heart to look at the tickets yet and everything, but I'm expecting probably around I would think another 10 would get me there and back. There's not a whole lot. Once we're going to get there a few days before, and then once, most of it's going to be on the boat, clearly, or on the island.
Yeah.
So, well, one thing we don't know is when we get back to Cape Town, there's a window of time there, and so we'll likely, have to put our flights and things towards the end of that time.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be some other expenses there, but it's another thing we'll never know until.
All right, let me explain that real quick. Él tiene aproximadamente calculado que el costo, aparte de los $20,000, son más $10,000 más. Eso incluye su vuelo, su comida, hoteles. Aparte de eso, no saben si cuando vuelvan a Cape Town, si ha sucedido algo, si hay que cambiar vuelos, eso hay costos, ¿no? Hay costos que introducir en eso. O sea que más o menos son $10,000 más que añadir en el proyecto. Aparte de eso, acuérdense que tienes 2 meses sin trabajar. Así
Me
que
imagino, Esteban, que también el riesgo en los equipos, ellos llevan sus propios equipos. Bueno, me imagino que hay patrocinio, para los equipos, pero muchas cosas deben llevarlo a ellos. Eso también entra, son equipos propios de ellos, eso también entra en los costos de la expedición. El riesgo de pérdida está latente.
déjame preguntar. The equipment you guys taking, is equipment being sponsored, or is that your personal own equipment as far as radios and antennas goes?
That we haven't made that decision yet. We have kind of taken a consensus of what the group has, and then we've had multiple offers from different radio manufacturers to sponsor us, and we're still mulling over those options and trying to decide what's best. So.
En este momento, Antonio, el proyecto son los equipos de ellos, pero han habido varias casas de equipos de radios que ya han dicho que van a poder, ¿cómo se llama? Ser patrocinantes de la expedición, pero en este momento el proyecto está basado en los radios personales de ellos, pero eventualmente a lo mejor una de las casas grandes, tanto sea Icon, Yaesur o Elecraft, sea patrocinante oficial y preste los radios para la operación. Enrique.
Ahora sí. Bien. Cantando. Okay, I'm making some similarity to another the expedition that happened to South Fork and South Sandwich or South George, I don't remember very well, here in the same latitude, okay, some years ago. I remember it was divided in two parts, first in one island, and then they went to another island, if you remember that.
Yes.
And if you remember, the first phase of the expedition failed because most of the antenna has broken because of large winds.
Yes.
And so they had to work with part of the antennas in the second part of the expedition, okay? How are you facing with the situation of winds? Because you mentioned you're going to use tri-banders. It seems that at that time they were using, it seems, monobanders. This was one of the things that maybe it was a wrong decision. And you're saying, no, we are using tri-banders. So you're going to take with you several tri-banders antennas just to diminish, okay, this risk. How was the decision on the antenna side? Over?
Well, yeah, those decisions aren't final yet, but that's where we are in the discussion. I think we're moving towards the idea of tri-banders, but it's largely because of the issues that you brought up. The wind load, the ease of getting them up and down. And then we have to plan for the failure of those antennas, you know, and what does that look like? Do we have a backup antenna? Is it just going to get torn up again? So, of course, we are taking a backup wire antennas and all of those sorts of things, and even trying to anticipate how can we easily pull the tri-bander down. We will have some warning from the sailboat. Will be constantly keeping us up to speed with the storms approaching. So we should have several hours of warning prior to a storm hitting us. And so, yeah, those are all, you know, and again, that may be a very disjointed expedition if we're running, you know, 8 stations and then we disappear for, you know, 4 or 5 hours. So we those are all things we're still thinking about logistically, but we've definitely have toned down the size of our antennas because they're basically big cells in the air, and the winds on Bouvet can can be devastating to the antennas, as it can to tents, which has also been an issue with some prior expeditions. So all of those are again, have to have fail-safe, or when they fail, what's the plan? When we lose our antenna, what is our tent? What is the plan? And so we're planning for all of those. We're planning to fail, which is a very different way that I've ever looked at anything, is we're planning to fail. So
Right.
it's humbling.
Let me try to explain that now.
Yeah, please.
La operación está viendo a utilizar antenas multibandas, pero a la misma vez están planificando para lo peor. Y toda la planificación está basada en lo que pueda suceder. Eso indica que si a lo mejor durante el día se cae una antena, a lo mejor tienen que usar un dipolo. Llevan antenas de cable por si acaso. Realmente no saben lo que pueda suceder. Y como todo tipo de expediciones están planificando en vez para lo mejor, sino para lo peor. Y viendo todos los casos posibles de desastres. Pero eventualmente todas las antenas van a ser multibandas. Tipo Yagi, más que todo para poder sobrevivir también la cantidad de vientos que existen en la isla. Y bueno, estarán en constante comunicación con el velero para prevenir cualquier tipo de desastre natural. Antiguas expediciones han perdido hasta las carpas por el viento. Así que acuérdense que están en el medio de la nada. Como expliqué, gente ha subido más a la luna que ha pisado Bouvet. Así que es un sitio que no es listo para humanos. Es un sitio donde existe no solamente las condiciones del tiempo, sino también hay animales que hay que estar, ¿cómo se llama?, pendientes también, animales salvajes. Y si sucede algo en la isla, no tienes un hospital a la vuelta de la esquina. Okay. Otra pregunta más, muchachos. Pregunta que rati hoy.
Sí, en parte eso es importante de la previsión de cualquier eventualidad en la isla, sobre todo con antenas, equipos, tener un backup necesario. Vi que uno de los patrocinantes es Ranco. Me imagino que le está donando los equipos, los triplexers y los filtros pasabanda para poder usar las antenas multibanda en diferentes bandas.
Yeah, you notice that Rango is one of the sponsors, I guess, for the filters and the duplexers and triplexers, for you guys be able to use multi-band antennas at all times.
Yes, and I'm not on the radio team. I'm on the logistics and some of the other stuff. But I know that there's a lot of planning going into, the tent design and how we're going to put the radios in there. And we're going to have these boards with all the switches. And I personally have never used a lot of those switches in my own personal station. And my expeditions I've been on have always been relatively small because they're IOTA expeditions. So I'm looking forward myself to how that works, because I know Renko has a lot of equipment and he's basically willing to help us in any way he can to make this happen. So, and as many sponsors already have, so we were getting a very good response from the community, and we really appreciate it.
Sí, Rango lo está ayudando a ellos con el diseño de la estación, ya que muchos de ellos no tienen experiencia con filtros y cómo va a ser utilizados. Entonces, pero realmente están viendo eso. Quick question: are you guys having two tents, one for the equipment, one for the operation, and one for sleeping quarters?
Yeah, so I think we've finally nailed down this answer, and there was a lot that went into this, because we don't know how level, or if it'll be level at all in our location. So we wanted to keep the footprint as minimal as we could, so that if we're on the side of a hill, it's not so stretched out. We think we've decided on a tent, and it will likely have two large operating tents that will be connected with a tunnel. And when I say large, I think there may be 4 meters circular. And the sleeping tent may very well be another one of those tents, but we have to build our campsite almost like a fortress to protect us from the wind.
Mhm.
So we have to design it in ways to deflect wind. And one way to do that is to have a smaller structure in front of a bigger structure. And so we may very well go with a smaller tent to sit adjacent to the other tents. And then we also have to build walls around to deflect the wind. These are all from people that have actually stayed on these locations and what it takes to truly survive the wind. And of course, we have plenty of rock and material to do that. So I guess to get back to your question, yes, the plan is to have 2 tents. One will solely be radios. One will have a few radios in kind of a social area, and then another sleeping tent. That's what we're thinking at this time. We're getting ready to test those tents out here pretty soon. So.
La pregunta que le hice yo a ellos, ¿cómo hacer los módulos de operación? Van a tener 2 carpas. Uno de los problemas que tienen, que acuérdense que la roca en Bouvet es volcánica y no saben cómo va a funcionar. Aparte de eso, no saben si va a ser una superficie totalmente plana. Pero en el momento son 2 carpas, una para la operación y otra para dormir, y conectada a través de un túnel, y van a poner paredes afuera para prevenir el viento, o para aguantar un poco el viento. Pero realmente todo esto, por supuesto, cuando lleguen a la isla tendrán que ajustar. Pero en este momento eso es lo que se está planificando para poder sobrevivir en Bouvet en esos días.
Esteban, antes de darle el derecho de palabra a Ramón, que la ha pedido, estoy un poco distraído aquí con la taquilla y otra tarea. Hay una pregunta por el chat, no sé si se la leyeron, que quieren saber si van a utilizar amplificadores lineales y van a operar las bandas WARC.
Are you going to operate with amplifiers, and are you going to be on the work bands?
Yes, we are going to do that. Again, we're not sure which amps those are yet or anything, but we plan on doing that. We're also, because the tent footprint is much smaller than what most expeditions have taken to these types of locations. So we're having to really plan out the station itself. So for example, we are looking at desks that may have a shelf underneath where we can put the amp to get it off of the desktop, because every inch of that desktop is precious on Bouvet, to try to keep it within the confines of a relatively small tent, given that many of these tents that people take are 20-foot diameter, so, I don't know what that is in meters. It's 8
meters.
8 meters. So, we're a much more confined space, but we're trying to put on the same radio footprint and get guys on the air. So.
Sí, piensan llevar amplificadores, por supuesto, todo en la isla tiene el espacio es oro, y la manera que están diseñando la mesa de operación es para poder poner los amplificadores abajo y tener más espacio arriba para los equipos. Como indicaba él, todo espacio, un espacio muy confinado para tener todos los equipos, y cada centímetro es oro. Así que, Ramón.
Vamos adelante.
Gracias. Good morning, Mike. It's a pleasure having you here among us, and it's very important to have physicians in the team. You're one of them, especially you an ER physician, which is a blessing, being so far away and alone, this group of people. On the other side, we have had the opportunity to work our IOTA islands. We have 15 groups here in Venezuela, and we have worked them before. We usually use quarter wave verticals in the last expeditions, and they have worked very well. One of the suggestions that we may give you to take along dipoles in V, not the aluminum. They're in aluminum, dipoles in V, not inverted V, but aluminum is in V, because you can adjust them to the different bands as a backup, and they're very practical. Basically, they work as verticals. So you may have that with you, that possibility. But thank you very much for being with us here and giving this chat, and all of us that are interested in DXing. Thank you.
Yeah. Hold on one second. I'd like to comment on that.
Mientras llega Mike, bueno, ellos tienen una bonita playa ahí en la isla, estoy viendo las fotos. Hay una playa muy bonita que pueden usarla.
Un tremendo barranco encima, de hielo.
Sí, al lado del barranco encima de hielo. Pero la playa es espectacular.
Okay, sorry about that, guys.
All right, don't worry.
I have grandchildren running around and dogs and stuff. So, on the antennas, I absolutely agree with you on the quarter wave verticals. It is the mainstay for my IOTA expeditions. In fact, I usually just take a very light push-up pole and a wire, and sometimes we'll actually cut the wire when we're on the island so that it is just perfectly matched where we want it. One thing that's vital for those antennas to work well is that they are close to the salt water, and they are tremendous at that location. In fact, when I was in Nicaragua, I had a beam next to a vertical, and I chose the vertical over the beam because it was a better antenna in that location. So we will be on a ridge 200 feet above the water, which isn't necessarily a bad position, but we will have a good amount of rock as you look towards the west immediately, which of course our goal is to get up above that onto that ridge line. And but again, we don't know when we get there how realistic it's going to be. For example, one thing I'm in charge of is the anchorage points, you know. So I'm working through how are we going to anchor these antennas. The lighter antenna, the much easier it is. But we don't know, is a 3-inch anchor, or is it going to need to be 5 inches? Is the rock going to hold it? So many unknowns that we're actually planning for multiple ways to do that in hopes that one of them is correct. But I do agree with the vertical. In fact, if anything, maybe that's why I'm not on the radio, the antenna team, because I push for more IOTA concepts. And it's been a good marriage of ideas, I think. And I think the idea that we want to try to really use a tri-bander, put the tri-bander up, and I think in that location it will work well. But we do definitely have the idea of, if that gets blown over, we can put up a push-up pole and a wire and cut it and make a vertical. So, and the footprint of those things, as you know, the weight is a few pounds, and you can have a monoband 20-meter vertical, probably less than 5 kilos maybe, or less. So yes, I've worked you guys in those IOTAs. I appreciate the times you have been down there. So thank you for those operations. So. Is
there another physician going with you?
Yes, Bill, Kilo Oscar 7 Sugar. He is family medicine, but he also works in urgent care. and as you being a physician, the decisions that we are having discussed, I can talk, I guess, briefly about that. It's really very different. Of course, we have to take people that are already healthy. But, what if somebody gets appendicitis while we're out there? What do we do? Those sorts of questions run through our mind. And by far, the biggest thing that Bill and I are doing is trying to push the concept of safety. We want to avoid injuries, not be there to treat them. Bill is over the safety aspect of that, and of course, he and I work closely on that. But even if it's not a devastating injury, let's say somebody is put in a position that they have to pull a rope for 3 hours to bring equipment up. Well, if they develop a bursitis or inflammation of the elbow and they can't work the next 2 or 3 days, that's mismanagement of our human resource. So we're trying to find those points. We've really dug in the medical history. You know, do you have a bad knee? Is your bad, you know, none of us are spring chickens, you know, on this thing. So we're trying to find the people's weak points and trying to make sure that we don't push our physical bodies beyond our limits. And so it's a way of thinking about things I've never had to in the past, which is part of the fascination of it. So.
Right. Let me try to translate that as best as I can. Una de las preguntas que Ramón estaba haciendo, la parte médica, la parte de preparación de lo que pueda suceder. En el viaje van ayudas médicos y se están preparando para todo, pero imagínate, están en medio de la nada, donde el esfuerzo puede ser 3 horas subiendo equipos con la polea, tus brazos no te dan más, o una apendicitis. Y ustedes saben muy bien lo que puede suceder en una expedición porque nos pasó a nosotros. Así que el equipo está preparándose para todo lo posible y justamente si sucede algo remoto, no solamente que sea una gravedad superior, pero hasta cosas menores que puedan, porque imagínate, un operador que estaba levantando todo el equipo con la polea, ya no puede hacer eso más, ya es una persona menos que se puede utilizar. O sea que todos esos planteamientos a nivel médico, a nivel científico, se están también haciendo en la parte de la operación. Enrique.
Okay, 2 short questions, Mike. First, what kind of logger the expedition is going to use for the contacts? And secondly, what kind of problem are you expecting on the power generators to happen in such tough conditions?
Yes, so we are planning on using N1MM logger. The generator is an interesting question and has been a difficult one for us to answer because we're not allowed to take gasoline on the ship for obvious reasons, much more explosive. And the engines on the sailboat run on diesel. So they can carry along all the diesel we would need largely in their tanks, although we'll obviously have other tanks. The problem is buying a diesel generator. At least in the States, that's not a concept that we really grasp on. Most of our generators in the States, the smaller ones, are gasoline. The smallest, Yanmar makes a diesel generator that weighs, I believe it's 75 kilos. And that is the lightest diesel generator we found. So that is going to be an issue trying to take it up 30 feet on the cliff. I actually did this at CY9M. We had a 30-foot cliff that we hoisted a generator up that didn't weigh that much. And I learned a lot from that experience. So yeah, I don't know that Yanmar is the one we're going to go with. It almost is the only one that we found that kind of is in that usable range. All the other diesel generators are just way too big for us to take. So I think right now we're looking at probably a 75 kilo diesel generator and having possibly 3 to 4 of those. So the conditions are another thing, right? These are not designed to operate in basically salt water. So now luckily we'll be a good 200 feet above the sea level. So we shouldn't have to deal with so much of the surf and the salt, but it will get there. So when I lived on Galveston Island off the coast of Texas, I was 5 blocks from the beach and I had salt on my vehicle, you know. So so maintenance is another thing, and maintenance of everything. The tents, the generators, that's part of surviving this thing for 2 to 3 weeks, is taking care of the equipment. And so that's a whole nother aspect that logistics is looking at, is what are the steps that we need to do to make these things survive? It sounds crazy to think, well, gee, a generator will last for 3 weeks. Well, maybe if it's not, maybe if it's constantly getting bombarded by salt water, it might not. And if you've done these expeditions in these salt environments, or just taking anything in these salt environments, you know that they don't last long if you don't be careful. So,
yeah, I was thinking about portable wind generators, but you have already explained that it's going to be tough even to erect the antennas there, and putting a tower of any propeller there with a wind generator could be a tough situation. But should be also any available new alternative, even though over.
yeah, so the one problem with the wind generators is they are very, very noisy on the RF bands. I've experienced that myself on some expeditions. And so I think, although the wind it makes a lot of sense. I think that it's one of those options that is, the batteries and all the equipment to get it up there. I think we're going to have to take our chances with the diesel generators, and which are much quieter on the radio bands. So yeah, I mean, we've tried to think. Of course, solar isn't really an option. There's just not going to be enough sunlight. But I think the most solid option is going to be the diesel generator. And the crazy thing about this trip is we can plan everything the best humanly possible, and something may still happen that prevents us from pulling this off. And that's what's kind of crazy about even thinking of going there. I went back and forth on going on this trip or not, and it just seems so crazy, but it's exciting also.
Let me just explain the whole situation there with the generators. Dos preguntas. ¿Van a utilizar N1MM como log, el logger? Y los generadores, el problema que hay es que como no pueden transportar gasolina en el velero. Esto totalmente por la seguridad del velero. Pero el velero sí puede tener diésel. El problema es que diesel, no hay muchos generadores que son que utilizan diesel comparado con gasolina, pero han encontrado varios. How much you say they weigh? 50 pounds?
75 kilos. 150.
Ya, cada generador son 65 kilos. Así que imagínense levantar un generador de esos con una polea hacia la isla. Y tanto subiéndola que bajando a la isla va a ser fácil. Pero, o sea, tener consideraciones de eso, y más que todo de combustible. Que no es tan fácil de... Y como estaba indicando él, todo esto está siendo preparado, pero pueden llegar a la isla y todo lo que han preparado no va a funcionar. Al llegar a la isla, las condiciones son totalmente distintas a lo que... Y no hay un Home Depot o una ferretería a la vuelta de la esquina. Así que
hay que explicar también que el velero no se puede acercar tanto a la playa por la quilla, que es otro factor que resta posibilidades de desembarcar.
Yeah, the other big issue you guys have is the sailboat cannot get too close to the island.
Right. So I wish I had the slide I could show you, but the depth of the bay that we're going to land, I call it loosely a bay. Basically, there's some rocks that jet out that protect a little more of the water. But we're hoping that the roughly probably 200 meters out, the water is roughly 60 meters deep. But then it quickly drops off, and probably the ship will have a hard time anchoring. But so we do think that I don't know if you can zoom in or if that's even live, but if you could zoom in, you will see the area. Yeah, go into that area right there. Yeah, keep going. Okay, and right, you see where those rocks jet out? Let's see.
Right here?
There are so
Yeah,
many
now
rocks around.
this is it, okay? Now here's the thing about this picture. This was taken, I believe, in 2012. And there has been a lot of retraction of the glacier since.
Okay.
We have photos from 2017 and suspect it's retracted even more. But you see those rocks, they jet out, and actually there's quite a few rocks underwater that's part of it, but you see the point up right there, yeah. So what we'll try to do is anchor to the northeast of that, in this area here, yes. And then the operating, so we get onto the beach there, and then the operating site is this ridge up here. Yeah, that ridge is where we'll be.
Okay, let me try to explain that. Aquí están esta es donde la operación van a poner la estación. Como pueden ver, esta es la entrada, la única entrada que ellos tienen a esta área. El barco, o sea, ven estas rocas que están aquí. Supuestamente todo esto, por supuesto, tiene que estar aquí. Acuerden que estos son glaciales que se mueven. Basada en las últimas fotos que ellos tienen, es más o menos lo que se está previendo es que el barco va a anclar justamente aquí y con Zodiacs llegar a esta playa, que no hay playa, una roca y subir todo hasta arriba. How are you guys planning to get from here to here? Are you guys going to scale it?
So initially we have to scale the rock, which is why we have 2 rock climbers on the trip.
Okay.
And then once we get up there, we will be able to get, the first step is to build basically the lift system, which is being designed now. And then from there we'll start. And this looks, and actually in this picture, the waves break up on the glacier, but now this glacier has pushed back quite a bit to where there's a lot more open space on the beach. This picture shows. So.
En la operación hay 2 operadores que son expertos subiendo montañas. Estos 2 operadores van a subir la roca, llegar acá arriba y hacer la instalación de la polea. Así que imagínense el esfuerzo que hay aquí y cada miembro de esta expedición cuenta. Al hacer eso, con la polea subirán el resto de los equipos y los restos de los humanos. Ahora, todo depende de cuando lleguen allá, si el hielo todavía sigue así. A lo mejor hay menos hielo o hay más hielo. Todo depende de cuando lleguen a la isla. ¿Qué condiciones consiguen?
And I guess one other point about Bouvet, and we talked about a little bit with the helicopters, there are actually a lot of windows where the winds shift and the seas lay down, but they're very short. And so, that was the problem with the helicopter. They didn't want to risk, the weather changing on them. Our goal is to be able to take every opening we get to get on the island.
Uno de los problemas que existen en Bouvet es que los vientos cambian al minuto. Esto fue lo que sucedió en la última expedición. Por eso es que ellos tienen que aprovechar cualquier tipo de ventana que tengan para movilizar lo máximo posible. Porque el tiempo puede cambiar en minutos.
And we're planning on having landing to take up to 3 days.
Solamente para desembarcar, están planificando 3 días para desembarcar. Y imagínense lo que puede suceder en 3 días. El riesgo que puede haber un grupo en la isla y nadie más suba. That's a big risk. You might have people on the island and everybody else on the boat.
Yes, so that's part of the logistics. So making sure that the initial landing crew can survive is part of the plan. And that is probably the biggest risk, is that initial getting on and getting off. So making sure that probably the first couple of loads will have nothing to do with radio, everything to do with survival. I'm going to step out just a second. I'll be right back.
Yeah. I'll take advantage of that and translate. Yo le hice la pregunta sobre el riesgo de la logística y justamente me explicó que los primeros 3 viajes prácticamente serán para los equipos de sobrevivencia, para el equipo que va a estar en la isla mientras los demás. Eso significa comida, refugio y todo lo posible que puedan subir en esos 3 días para solamente soportar la existencia del equipo que va a estar en la isla. Igualmente, el equipo, al salir de la isla también, dejar algo atrás para, ¿cómo se llama? Para el caso de emergencia.
Una de las cosas más preocupantes no es no poder subir a la isla, sino no poder salir de la isla.
Eso es justamente lo que estaba diciendo él.
Exacto, por eso.
Y
No salir de la isla.
el cambio de clima es tan drástico que a lo mejor vas a tener un grupo en la isla y otro grupo en el bote, ¿no? Y esperar a ver cuándo puedes ser rescatado, puedes ser, o sea, estás en medio de la nada y no tienes a un helicóptero a la vuelta de la esquina.
There was a recent, I can't remember the expedition, but whenever they were leaving, I think the weather changed. It's went to one of these islands, and they had to stay. The last 3 guys had to stay on the island for, I think, 24 hours before they could get them off. And that was something that they luckily survived, but they didn't plan for. So those sorts of things we're trying to learn from, and you cannot mitigate, you cannot go with no risk, but trying to make that the least amount of risk is the goal.
O sea, la planificación ha sido que otras expediciones han sucedido que el último grupo de salir, el tiempo cambió y tuvieron más de 24 horas para poder salir de una isla de estas. Y todo eso tiene que ser mitigado en la parte del riesgo, la parte de ecuación del riesgo en esta operación. O sea, tienes que planificar para todo lo malo que pueda suceder, esperando que todo salga bien. Enrique.
Tiene una pregunta.
Yes, Mike, exactly in the same line, okay? About timing planning. Is there any limitation in terms of timing, differently from Braveheart, when you have bad conditions, weather conditions, that eventually have to wait 1 week or more than that just to go to the island? Because the back trip, it's okay, you have to leave, okay? The time you need, the people have to be rescued, okay? But when you are going to the island, expecting to go to the island, then you had bad conditions there, okay? How much time do you have, or it's planned to expect before you decide to abandon, or just to stay all the time you need, okay, to go to the island? You know what I mean? Is there a kind of timing limitations if you cannot expect good weather conditions?
Yes, yeah, well, the captain is, for the selling piece, feels quite confident that we can go largely, not independent of the weather, but it have to be, because remember, you're selling with the wind. So if you have these 20-foot waves, you're at least going with the wind. If you remember Dom's last efforts, the problem was that he has a very deep hulled, big nose vessel trying to go into the wave. And so obviously those conditions can change, but that's planned for. So you may have to turn the boat around and sell for half a day and then turn back towards Bouvet, but that's why it's 12 days planned. If everything went, relatively well, you could probably do it considerably shorter than 12 days, given that the boat could possibly cover 400 miles a day, which would be tremendous, but yeah, so there's already a lot of bad stuff built into the plan. So 12 days to get there is, of course, what we would hope would be enough. And then on the island, those are discussions we're actually having. We're thinking of failures. So if we lose a main tent, do we leave or do we have a backup plan? I think our plan at this point is to have a backup plan. So if a big storm comes and takes down our tents, how do we protect the equipment during that? And our emergency shelter, which is one of the first things we'll build, and part of that 3-day window, actually will be part of the main camp. And So yeah, we're thinking about that. When do we say enough is enough? You know.
Just kidding. Any Boy Scout in the team?
I'm an Eagle Scout, so.
There you go.
Oh, great. Me too.
Let me just explain that in Spanish there a little bit.
Sure.
Prácticamente todos los planes tienen sus peros en esa situación. Una de las cosas que puede suceder que estén arriba en la instalación y la carpa se destruya por un viento. Una de las cosas principales que van a construir es un campamento de emergencia. Así que o sea, puede ser que en el medio de la operación se levante la carpa y los equipos quedan a la intemperie. Ahí va la operación. O sea, todos estos factores, ¿no?, están siendo calculados en la operación. O sea, que mi recomendación a todos ustedes, si la escuchen, trabajan ya, porque no saben si el día siguiente va a estar la operación o no. I just telling them, if you hear your guys, work them right away, because you might not know if you'll be around for the next couple hours.
We may not even make it back.
Just make sure the logs make it back.
Yeah.
No, pero hablando en serio, una de las cosas que, o sea, ellos pueden llegar a la isla, pero imagínate, a lo mejor no regresan. O sea, hay todo tipo de riesgo en esta operación.
¿Cómo es el sistema de polea o de funicular?
He's asking about the
questions, you know?
yeah, he's asking about the pulley and the structure. How is it?
Do you know what a capstan is?
A what?
A capstan.
¿Tú sabes lo que es un capstan, Mauro?
Sí, yes, I know.
Yeah. So capstan is a device. It's a motorized device that is a wheel that turns, and the part that goes from the ocean to the beach is we're looking at anchoring a pulley in the water with probably 3 15-kilo anchors. And it'll be anchored in about 100 feet or 30 meters of water. And the capstan will be on the beach and will do all the pulling for us. So the dinghy will get to the pulley system that's probably 200 meters off the beach, or 100 meters or so off the beach, and we'll attach the equipment to the pulley system that will then drag it through the surf, whether it be attached to another dinghy that's dragged through, if conditions are good, or possibly just in a floating waterproof bag that is dragged through the surf to get onto the island. And there's some other risks that we'll only know if we get there. For example, it seems unlikely, but if there are a dozen elephant seals on the beach where we want to land, we will not be able to land. Now, most of the satellite imagery we have seen shows that the elephant seals are much more likely to go to other beaches, but we don't know till we get there. So obviously, we'll just have to see. So.
Uno de los factores que también tienen la expedición es que ellos saben dónde están los elefantes marinos, basado en las fotos que existen ahorita. Pero al llegar a la isla, a lo mejor estas focas elefantes marinos están paradas justamente donde van a poner la expedición. Y realmente, esto no es como ir para allá a SeaWorld, que uno, ¿cómo se llama? Puede jugar con los elefantes marinos. Estos son animales salvajes. Imagínate, en el medio de la operación, se te aparecen son unos animales dentro y no los puedes tocar tampoco porque están protegidos.
Y no los puedes espantar tampoco.
Exacto, ellos son los dueños de la isla.
Pero
Mauro estaba preguntando sobre el sistema de poleas para subir y realmente se ve bastante rudimentario, pero eficaz, ¿verdad, Mauro?
Es la mejor forma.
So I was explaining about your pulley system and you guys having a barbecue with some of the seals. I just don't know how about Texas barbecue anyway, but
Well, I don't know if they understand the size of an elephant seal, but
they understand it.
Yeah, they're close to the size of an elephant, you know, but a seal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, let me show a picture real quick. Esto, no, yo no sé si en Estados Unidos siempre hay un debate en quién tiene la mejor salsa barbecue, si es Memphis o Texas. Yo creo que es Memphis. Pero este es el tamañito de una de ellas que se puede aparecer en la carta. Así que, no sé, esto con unas cartas caraotas y arroz, creo que sobrevivimos ahí, ¿verdad, Antonio?
Empanada de cazón.
So yeah, it's definitely I'll be working you guys. I don't envy this trip.
Well, I tell you, to me, I think it's the closest I'll ever to feel how some of those early explorers must have felt going into some unknown. And I've never had so much anxiety about anything I've done. So I question myself often, but I think we all do. And I think that's what makes Bouvet the challenge it is. So.
¿Qué temperaturas esperan tener allá en la isla?
What type of temperatures you guys expecting on the island?
The temperatures this time of year, which of course is their summer, should hang right around 0 Celsius. In the daytime, you know, we'll get a little warmer. It will probably freeze most nights. That's the other concern with the antennas and their capture spaces, and the tents is if you get ice, it's much worse than if you get snow. And so the ice, of course, can weigh down antennas, can weigh down tents. This is all part of the maintenance that we have to plan for if these things happen.
¿Entendiste, Antonio? Ellos recuerdan que ellos van en el verano, pero la temperatura está más o menos a 0 grados. Pero todo, o sea, y esos dos factores en las antenas. Que las antenas aguantarían el frío, el hielo, etc.
Y los equipos también, porque me imagino 0 grados en el día y quizá en la noche menos, y la sensación de temperatura por el viento y la brisa baja más. Entonces, creo que también los equipos pudieran sufrir. Me imagino que dentro de las carpas van a tener calefacción. Mira, hay 2 preguntas. Está Kevin, que levantó la mano primero.
Déjame traducir lo que acabas de decir. One of the questions, one of the mention was, you know, the consideration of temperatures and equipment. And he's assuming it's going to be some sort of a heating system inside the tent, right?
Yeah, the Norwegians, when they went to Svalbard, they worked with a heater that ran off of paraffin, so basically candle wax. And the tents we have are designed to house that heater. So yeah, and you know that's another question of how much fuel do we want to take. But if we don't keep the operators warm enough, then they shiver and they go through more calories. And so we're basically we're calculating about 3,000 calories a day needed on average per operator. And if we can't keep people warm, it'll be more than that. So that's not an issue if you're there for a weekend, but if you're on the island for 2 to 3 weeks, you can truly reach the point of starting to starve. And so all those things have to be considered.
Antes de pasarle el cambio aquí a Kevin, Antonio, una de las cosas que las calefacciones trabajan con parafina y mantener todo el campamento caliente. Acuérdate que están calculando que cada persona va a consumir
3.300 calorías.
Unas 3.300 calorías. Imagínate, estás ahí por 2 semanas. Es un factor que hay que y mantenerte activo. Y físicamente para poder controlar también el pilot. Recuerda que, o sea, condiciones físicas, especialmente cuando estén copiando mi indicativo, que lo esté copiando correctamente, no tenga ninguna falta de oxígeno. Así que.
Ya entendí el comentario. Y por las antenas no hay problema. 1 kilovatio las calienta.
He said, don't worry about the heating system for the antennas. With a kilowatt, you'll be fine.
Yes.
Okay, Kevin, you raise your hand?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry I came late to the meeting. I was just wondering what island are you going to visit, and what type of ship are you going to use? En otras palabras, me gustaría saber cuál es la isla que van a visitar y qué tipo de barco van a emplear. Cambio.
Yeah, so we're going to Bouvet, which is in the South Atlantic. It's a roughly 2,200 miles from Ushuaia and about 1,600 miles from Cape Town. And we're taking a 101-foot ocean ketch, which is a large sailboat that will go from Ushuaia to Bouvet to Cape Town, following the winds. So that's where we're going. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's the Southern Ocean, man. That's those are heavy seas there. Okay.
Yes, and the boat that we're going on has traversed some. That's what they do. So many boats that we talked to said no, we will not go to Bouvet. But this boat was like, sure, let's do it. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a big sailor myself, but anyway. Thank you.
You're welcome. Gregorio, ¿tienes una pregunta?
Sí, un comentario también. Thank you very much, Jen, for Eco Bravo. Very good. Muchas gracias. Ahí Esteban, dile que, por favor, que muchas gracias por compartir los conocimientos con nosotros, que tenemos algo de experiencia, 25 años de expediciones a las diferentes islas de aquí de nosotros. Tuvimos una experiencia también ahí en el 2006 en Isla de Ave. Ok. Y agradecerle al colega Jane por estar aquí con nosotros. Ese es el comentario. Ahí además, que por favor, Esteban, cuando estén allá, miren un poquito hacia el sur. No vaya a ser que sea un argentino y a nosotros que nos parta un rayo. Cambio.
Gregorio, estar más al sur que donde están ellos no va a estar más nadie.
Al sur no pueden apuntar.
He wanted to say thank you very much for you guys doing this, and even though you're way south, don't forget that guys up north. Because one of the biggest things you're gonna have. You're gonna be finding the Japanese pilot, but don't forget about the YB pilot as well.
We'll definitely be listening for you guys for sure.
And also the Brazilians.
Yes.
Just make sure that the folks who are here in Tennessee get you first, right?
Pero,
we'll probably just skip right over.
Está más cerca.
¿Ah?
No,
Está más cerca que nosotros de la isla.
El problema es, con el permiso, Antonio, sabemos está al sur, está cerca, está todo, pero estamos en el sur. Mirar un poquito al sur, no vaya a ser que nos parta un rayo.
No, tiene que mirar más para el norte, Gregorio.
No, está bien. Allá y acá también un poquito.
Voy a traducir a Gregorio. Gregorio lo que quiso decir es que estén pendientes de Sudamérica, porque muchas de las expediciones a estas islas así, que están las más buscadas del DXCC, por lo general se olvidan de Sudamérica. Entonces, claro, no son tantas las estaciones que hay en Sudamérica como lo hay en Europa, Estados Unidos, Japón. Y eso es lo que se refiere a Gregorio, que miren a Sudamérica en el sentido de que estén pendientes de que también hay estaciones en este continente que quieren trabajar a la isla. Esa es la traducción de lo que hizo Gregorio.
Eso. Tú sabes lo que yo quise decir. Eso. Un poquito nomás.
He's just referring to for you guys don't forget to work the South American stations, because they seem to most of the expeditions are narrowed down to Japan and the States. We don't know why, but it must be the green stamp issue. But he wants to make sure that you guys also understand that the Bouvet is well needed in there.
Yes.
In other words, we can't forget about Yankee Victorlandia.
Yes. No, and I think we all recognize that. We hear the same thing from the VKs,
But they're closer to you guys.
But you guys are kind of our neighbors, so it's not too bad for the distance. But I mean, well, of course, we haven't yet, but we'll name pilot stations and things like that. We are planning on having, at minimum, you know, the ability to upload logs and exchange emails and things. So we are going to listen. You know, that's definitely in our plan. We realize that it may be a very long time that somebody goes back to Bouvet, assuming that we successfully pull this off.
Right.
If that happens, and you know, this may be the only chance for another 20 years, and we want to get as many out there. And that's, you know, that's why, although I don't think anybody on the team is a huge fan of FT8, but we're all diving into it, and we recognize that we are going to make a lot of FT8 contacts, as well as phone and CW.
No,
and
I'm gonna have to drop you from this call if you keep mentioning those 3-letter words to me, at least. But let me try to explain that to them real quick.
Yeah.
La misión de la expedición es hacer todos los jueceos posibles. Ellos saben muy bien que operar desde Bouvet no es todos los días, y quién sabe cuándo va a ser la próxima expedición a Bouvet. Y ya ha pasado bastante tiempo y ya ven dónde están en las más buscadas. Así que totalmente es algo que ellos están pensando. Una de las cosas que van a utilizar FT8 es por eso, es para darle la oportunidad a la mayor gente posible que pueda trabajar la operación. Así que basado en eso están haciendo los planes. Así que todos tendrán la oportunidad de trabajarlos, así que este es el momento de comenzar a optimizar sus antenas.
Yo me voy para Sao Paulo, creo. A ver si lo trabajo de allá, más fácil.
Tranquilo.
Enrique tiene la mano levantada.
Sí, sí. One interesting question. We live in the southern part of Brazil, so somehow when we want to get in touch, for us, let's say on phone VK, it's impossible for us, okay? It's crazy. Why? Because we have to cross over Antarctica region, and geomagnetic situation doesn't allow us to get in touch with the Aussies, okay? Are you expecting the same kind of problem when you're working nearby the Antarctica, where you have a large geomagnetic interference, okay, to cross over them to the other side?
Yes, I mean, that's always been an issue. When I've operated close to the Arctic region, that is like a curtain to stations. And I was in Newfoundland, and we made very few JA contacts because of that. So luckily, you know, I have to look, I guess Australia may be in the worst position. Most of the things are north of us, so we won't have to deal with that too much. And we're far enough north where we're, you know, propagation isn't going to be great, but we shouldn't have necessarily days of no propagation. But again, and I hate to say it, but then it's kind of good to say too, FT8 will allow us likely to make many more contacts when we would not be making any contacts. So we are going to constantly be trying to make contacts. There's nothing else for us to do. And there's no reason other for us to be on that island. It's precious time on it.
Right.
And so we are going to we're going to try to run 8 stations. We are all working on trying to multitask with phone and FT8, which is doable. You know, and that's how these guys are making 20, 30,000 contacts all by themselves in a week or so, you know. And if we can do that and pull that off, then I think we'll be a success. So.
All right, Jan. Before we wrap this up, I'm gonna do the selfish plug in Spanish, and I'm gonna start passing the hat around for a second for you guys. Just give me 1 second. Let me try to sell this as best I can before they hit me in the head with tomatoes or whatever else. Una de las razones que quería decir esto aquí es que hablando con Ramón de 5 Eco Delta, hemos tanto el grupo de X Caracas como Ramón y yo estamos proponiendo una pequeña donación a la operación. Ya ahí tenemos a una persona que ya nos contactó, que todo lo que cojamos, esta persona va a hacer la misma contribución, así que podríamos doblar la contribución. Así que más tarde, si quieren contribuir, pónganse en contacto conmigo les paso la cuenta de PayPal que tenemos del grupo de X aquí en Estados Unidos. De mi parte ya yo puse ya plata aparte, ya estoy poniendo yo una cantidad de $100 de mi parte y comenzamos a pasar la cachucha alrededor, y lo que se pueda colectar se manda al nombre del grupo de X Caracas para la expedición. So I just told them that we just open up a small GoFundMe type of approach where if anybody wants to give out money, I'm going to give them our PayPal account. Whatever we raise, we already have a anonymous donor who's willing to match whatever we collect, and I'm already putting $100 out of my pocket into the fund. And whoever wants to collaborate, they can email me, and I'll give them the PayPal account, and we'll transfer some money into it. Once we have collected, we'll send it over to you guys.
Can you put your email address in the chat, please?
You can look me up in qrset.com, and you can find my email address there.
Fine.
And I would like to just say, the team appreciates the effort. As I sit here talking about this, I've convinced myself this isn't a crazy idea, but then as I talk to you about it, I have to re-question all of that. But it is, it's a dream come true, but it also seems like a nightmare in the same instance. And so we're all very excited, and we want to get everybody in the log as we identify those. And again, the great thing about information now is, you guys know I'm going, you can email me as time gets closer, and you notice, things with propagation or whatever, we want to know what you think. And hopefully with 8 stations, we can listen somewhere when we need to. So that's the plan. And again, thank you for taking the time and listening and asking the questions.
Oh, thanks to you for coming over here and trying to do our best translating both languages back and forward. And
maybe as we get closer, we can do another one, just an update on some of like the what radio we're going to have, or do we nail down the antennas, right. And just some updates on stuff if there's interest.
I tell you what, I'm gonna put you in the spot. So as it gets closer to the operation, maybe I want you to come back and talk to us again. And tell you what, after the operation, successful operation, you can come back and give us a presentation of how how the whole story ended up. So we really appreciate you guys up, and like I said, we'll give you an open invitation to come back and see us once you come back successfully from Bouvet.
Yes, and it will be a success, and I definitely will be back.
Definitely.
Vamos a pasar al horario open bar, Esteban.
Right. So now we're gonna switch to what we call like a happy hour type of situation, where we just finish the presentation, and now it's pretty much open to anything now. Again, I appreciate you being with us today, and have a wonderful Saturday, my friend.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to get out of here. I got people knocking on my door. So, but
I understand.
Thanks again, and I'll catch up with you guys later.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye. Best of luck.
Thank you. Good luck.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Bye.
Thank you,
Mike.
guys.
Best wishes. Good sailing.
Hope to get you all in the log.
Hey, is the captain's name Skip Novak by any chance?
No.
Oh, because there's a guy that's Skip Novak. He does sailing in the Southern Ocean all the time. I thought maybe it would be him.
If you look up Marama, I guess one point I can make is you can go to 3y0nj.no. There's also a Facebook page if you look for 3y0j if you're on Facebook. Okay. And we also have a YouTube channel that we hope to put up some information on. But if you look up Marama Expeditions, there's something along those lines, you'll see the book and they'll tell you about it. So okay. Yeah. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Omar.
Thank you very much.
Despide el programa, Esteban.
Bueno, muchachos, gracias por haber participado hoy en este programa mixto. Los invito para el próximo sábado, que tenemos a otro invitado especial. Tenemos a Dan Sullivan, Wikicuatro de Alta Alfanense, que nos habla de la expedición a Sable, la próxima semana. Así que tenemos otro invitado especial para otra expedición. Así que estamos pendientes. Y bueno,
Excepcional.
no se olviden que, que esto lo vamos a subir después a YouTube, y cualquier pregunta, déjenme saber. Así que espero que tengan un buen sábado, muchachos.